I want to share with you a deeply traumatic, sad and truly terrifying experience that took place in a hospital. I rarely visit healthcare centers since then, unless it's absolutely necessary. I never imagined that what I witnessed was real, and for months I couldn't bring myself to accept that what I saw actually happened. It was in 2001, right after I had graduated as a professional psychologist. The celebration was a grand event, immortalized in photos, videos, and unforgettable moments that would stay with me forever. It was one of the happiest days of my life. However, after that, my younger brother was admitted to the hospital due to an illness he had been battling for years. He was the light of my life, my reason for living. When they told me someone had to stay with him for several nights, I knew it would be me, no matter how long it would take. The tests would take some time, and the doctors mentioned that, due to his delicate condition, they had to slightly increase the dosage of his medication. He looked fine, smiling and joking with me, laughing at my bad jokes just to make me feel better. I even brought my laptop so we could watch movies at night, hoping it would help him fall asleep if he got bored. The nights would go by until early morning, when he finally closed his eyes to sleep. One night I went out of the room and stayed near the hallway, in an area where some nurses were working at computers. I started talking to one of them, and the main topic was that I had recently graduated as a psychologist. We kept chatting until the subject of the room next to my brother's came up. The nurse told me that a month before, a child had suddenly passed away during the night while in perfect health. He had been hospitalized for a simple arm fracture and was supposed to be discharged the next day. His family filed a lawsuit against the hospital, claiming something must have happened to him and that they weren't given a logical explanation for his death. The thing was, the cameras didn't capture anything unusual, and no one entered his room that night. He was just waiting for morning to leave. The nurse even seemed scared as she shared this story, and then she mentioned that maybe the rumors circulating online were true. Curious, I asked her what rumors she meant, but before she could answer, another nurse arrived and interrupted the conversation. She had to leave. When I went back to my brother's room, I froze. There was a boy next to him. You may wonder why I'd be scared to see an innocent child talking to my brother. The reason was that the nurse had shown me a photo of the child who had passed away, and it was him. Right there in front of me, the boy was gently petting my brother's head. Without thinking, I turned around to open the door and tell the nurses, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it was locked, and I couldn't open it no matter how hard I tried. The boy then told me not to try anymore, saying that only he could open it. He calmly walked away from my brother, came up to me and said that someone would come for my brother that week. He warned me that there was nothing I could do about it. After that, he walked over to the door I couldn't open and opened it easily. I followed him immediately, but when I got out, he had vanished as if the earth had swallowed him whole. It was as if no one had seen him. I knew deep down that this was exactly how it was, and I didn't investigate further. The next day, I searched online and found a forum discussing the very hospital I was at. People there shared stories about a ghostly nurse, one who had died years ago while giving birth but never crossed over. It was said that she found comfort in children's spirits, often appearing to them and sometimes even to adults. Reading that filled me with fear, and I immediately began to worry about my brother's safety. The next day, I did everything I could to transfer him to another hospital, but my parents were told that was impossible. The treatment was working, and any changes could harm his health. That night, as the hours passed, I felt desperate. We had to leave, but no one could help. There were very few staff members on the floor at that time, and the silence was overwhelming. The only sound was the beeping of the machine monitoring my brother's vital signs. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in anymore and rushed to the bathroom. While I was washing my hands, something strange happened. The atmosphere suddenly felt colder, darker, and an overwhelming sadness washed over me. That's when I began hearing my brother's vital signs accelerate rapidly for no reason. I rushed to open the door to warn the nurses, but it was stuck. It wouldn't open, even though I'd had no problem earlier. The oppressive presence grew stronger, and I felt paralyzed with fear. Then I heard the terrible sound of the machine flatlining. I managed to open the door this time, but when I got to my brother's side, it was too late. He was gone. I ran to find help, but nothing could be done. He had passed away from what the doctors claimed was a sudden cardiac arrest. I've never stopped thinking about that night, wondering if my poor brother saw something horrifying or if some malevolent force caused his death, just like the other child. The nurse had told me in secret that these mysterious and sudden deaths were more common than I'd realized, but no one was willing to speak out. I tried to shout that something evil was going on in the hospital, that more children might die, but they just tried to calm me down. By morning, I thought the press would flood the place with reporters, but not a single one showed up. The hospital covered it all up, and soon after we began receiving threatening calls and messages from strangers, warning us not to speak out. We buried my brother with an incredible amount of pain, knowing that I couldn't do anything to save him. Many people talk about having terrifying experiences in hospitals, involving paranormal entities, the presence of people who died in the building, and things like that. But I can tell you that that day, I was more afraid of a living person than a dead one. Maybe there is evil in demons, in spirits and ghosts, but from my perspective, the evil of a human being will always surpass them. Sometimes those entities use us as intermediaries. My name is Gloria, and this happened in 2015 when I was hospitalized. By then I had been in the hospital for about 2 weeks due to a motorcycle accident I had with my best friend. The recovery was going well. I could walk on my own and move freely around the room. The doctor was waiting on a few last tests and scans to confirm that everything was fine. I knew that even if I didn't feel it, accidents like mine sometimes left hidden consequences that could cause problems later, so they were just being cautious. I had made friends with some of the nurses, and my friends visited me 3 or 4 times a week. I know some of them did it because of how beautiful the nurses were. Honestly, they were stunning and we joked about it. Luckily, the nurses allowed my friends to stay in the room even when they exceeded the visiting hours limit. Despite the good treatment, they didn't allow anyone to stay with me at night, not even in the waiting room on the first floor. I didn't understand why, but they just said it was the hospital's policy and my parents reluctantly accepted it. They weren't happy about it though. They just wanted to be with me all the time and not have to wait until the morning to check on me. I prayed for those tests to come back quickly so I could get discharged, as those weeks in the hospital felt endless, just like the long days. Then one afternoon, we were notified that the doctor who had been overseeing my recovery was suddenly replaced. A new doctor arrived, and he was incredibly friendly to both me and my mother. In fact, he gave us hope that I could stay with her overnight, but not that night. He said he would speak to the director to make sure that for the rest of my stay, I could have someone with me at night. He didn't seem particularly interested in the comfort of the patients, though. My mother joked that I must have caught his attention, but I didn't care. I was already infatuated with a guy from university, so the doctor was out of the picture. The night came, and he told my mother that she couldn't stay, but that the following night everything would be arranged. All I had to do was wait one more day. Everything seemed fine, and the night felt so normal that not doubting it for a second turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. The clock struck midnight when the doctor entered, looking frantic, saying that they had approved an emergency transfer to another hospital, and we had to leave immediately. I was shocked. I tried to text my mother, but the doctor was quicker. He grabbed my phone and put it in a bag, saying I'd get my belongings later. He unlocked the wheels on my bed and started pushing me down the hall. I found it odd because I didn't see any other nurses or staff. The weight of my body felt heavy, and I couldn't understand why. I felt like I was about to faint, and that fear made everything worse. My only thought was that there might have been something in the IV they had given me. We traveled for a few minutes, took the elevator and arrived at a remote room where the lights barely worked. He didn't bring the bed in, removed the IV, picked me up, and laid me down on the floor. The room was small and the bed would have taken up too much space. As I barely managed to sit up, the doctor turned on the light and, before leaving, told me that bad luck had come knocking at my door. He warned me that if I screamed, he would come back and close my eyes permanently. Then he left. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in the room. Next to me, a girl was sitting with her knees drawn to her chest, trembling, resting against the wall. At the back of the room, there was a dead body of another woman dressed in nurse's clothes, and the smell was starting to fill the room. The girl turned to me and said that the doctor had killed her. I asked her who the man was, and she confessed that he worked for a human trafficking ring, replacing patients and hiding them in that room where they could never be found. In the days to come, they would be reported as missing, but in reality, they would be far away, maybe in another country, or even dead. The girl told me that one of the women who discovered this had been the one killed by the doctor. It was clear to me then that we weren't going to leave alive. I tried to get up and open the door, but my legs wouldn't respond. I asked her to do it, but she was so terrified that she couldn't even move. She kept shaking her head, refusing to do what I suggested. 2 hours later, the doctor returned, accompanied by a nurse. She was the one who would lead us from our room to this dark place. The malice in her eyes, the way she spoke and how she treated us like objects, made me realize that the girl wasn't lying. and that this evil went beyond anything I had ever known. The doctor left, locking the door behind him, and then the girl beside me gathered the courage to stand and try to open the door, but it was in vain. I gathered what strength I had left to help her, but it was useless. Hours passed, and as it got dark I became desperate, screaming for help. The girl cried too, and then she started screaming with me. The ray of hope came when someone appeared, running, and said he would find a way to get us out. He introduced himself as the girl's brother who had come to visit her after hours. When he couldn't find her, he knew something was wrong and began searching for her. He managed to break down the door, and we told him everything that had happened. We called the police and waited for the officers on the first floor of the hospital. They found the body in that room and immediately arrested the doctor, who never confessed to anything. It was clear he hadn't worked alone, and they also arrested the nurse who had helped him with his crimes. Since then, I've said and will continue to say, a ghost can scare and traumatize you, but the greatest danger will always come from another human being. Someone fully aware and in their right mind. That's pure evil. Many people talk about terrifying experiences in hospitals, involving paranormal entities or the presence of people who passed away in the building. But I can share that, on that particular day, I was more afraid of a living person than of any ghost. There may be evil in demons, specters, and ghosts, but from my perspective, human malice will always surpass it. These entities sometimes use us as intermediaries. My name is Gloria, and this happened in 2015 while I was hospitalized. I had been there for about 2 weeks following a motorcycle accident with my best friend. My recovery was going well. I could walk on my own and move freely around my room. The doctor was waiting for a few last tests to confirm everything was fine. He told me that even if I didn't notice it, some accidents left lingering effects that could cause future problems, so they wanted to prevent or address them early. I had made friends with a few of the nurses, and my friends visited me 3 to 4 times a week. I know some of them came for the beautiful nurses. They were undeniably attractive, and we joked about it. Luckily, the nurses allowed my friends to stay in the room, even when there were more than the allowed number during visiting hours. Despite the good treatment, they didn't allow anyone to stay with me at night, not even in the waiting area on the first floor. I didn't understand why, and they just said it was hospital policy. My parents accepted it, albeit reluctantly. It wasn't a problem for them, but they preferred being with me all the time rather than waiting until morning to check on me. I prayed that my tests would be done quickly, so I could go home. Those weeks felt like they lasted forever. One afternoon, we were told that my doctor had been replaced last minute by another one. He was incredibly friendly with me and my mother, and even gave us hope that I could stay with her. But not that night. He said he would speak to the director so that someone could stay with me at night for the rest of my stay. My mom joked that I had won his favor, but I didn't care. I had a boyfriend back at university, so the doctor was out of the picture. That night, he told my mom that she couldn't stay with me, but assured her that he had everything arranged for the following night. I thought everything was going smoothly until the night took a bizarre turn. The clock struck midnight when the doctor entered the room in a bit of a panic, telling me I was being transferred to another hospital. I was startled, but he quickly took my phone, put it in a bag, and assured me that I'd get all my belongings at the new hospital. He removed the lock from my bed and wheeled me out through the halls. The strange part was that I didn't see any nurses or staff, and my body felt unusually heavy. I could barely move or speak, and I was convinced something in my IV was making me feel this way. After a few minutes, we took an elevator, and I was moved to a very isolated room where the lights barely worked. The doctor removed my IV, carried me to the floor, and told me the worst news. He said, "Bad luck has come knocking at your door, and if you scream, I'll come back and close your eyes forever." He left, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. A woman was sitting next to me, trembling, with her knees pulled to her chest. At the far end of the room was a dead body, another woman in a nurse's uniform. The girl beside me whispered that this man had killed her, and I learned that he was part of a human trafficking ring, replacing patients with others to disappear them, sending us off to another country or worse, leaving no trace. When I tried to stand to open the door, my legs wouldn't respond. I urged her to do it, but she was too terrified to move. 2 hours later, the doctor returned with a nurse, and it became clear to me that they had no sympathy for us, just treated us like objects. They locked the door again, and the girl beside me tried to stand and open the door, but it was futile. Hours passed, and we started screaming for help. Eventually, someone appeared, a man who said he would help us. He was the brother of the girl with me. He had come to visit her outside of visiting hours. and realized something was wrong. He got to us, called the police, and they arrested the doctor. He never confessed, but it was clear he wasn't acting alone, and they also arrested the nurse who was helping him with his crimes. Since then, I've said it loud and clear. Ghosts can scare you, traumatize you, but the real danger always comes from other humans who are fully conscious and aware. That's pure evil. Many claim demons don't exist, while others affirm they've been victims of their malicious powers. I, on the other hand, can say that the greatest tool for spreading evil and harm is humans, and a terrible experience confirmed my belief. In 2014, I was hospitalized after a bus I was riding crashed. My right arm was fractured, and I was given strong medication for the pain and constant dizziness. My family was worried sick, and very few could visit me due to work schedules. Some days my aunt or cousin came, while other times I was alone, updating them via phone. It was tough, especially since I had to do almost everything with one hand, and my cast would stay on for a long time, even after I was discharged. The worst part was the doctor. He would always scold me, sometimes for how I sat or the state of my IV. He would take it out and replace it, and his attitude was very harsh. At one point, he scared me with a new diagnosis. He said the impact on my head had caused severe damage, and a brain hemorrhage could happen at any moment without any warning. I cried in front of him, and he tried to comfort me, telling me there was a chance I'd be okay, but the risk was there. He left, but returned 2 hours later to tell me my father had been in a serious accident and might not survive. My grief intensified. The doctor then asked me if I'd be willing to do anything to save my father's life. I, desperate, agreed. He said the only way to save both him and me was for me to sell my soul through him. I was in such despair that I agreed. He led me to a hidden room with candles and a strange symbol drawn on the floor. I was told to kneel and recite prayers in a language I didn't understand, all while a disturbing atmosphere surrounded me. I did as he said, and suddenly the flames from the candles grew higher, the heat unbearable, and I began to feel cold and feverish at the same time. Then voices began to urge me to read faster. I began to panic as figures with glowing eyes appeared around me. The doctor told me to ignore them, but I was terrified. Eventually the room spun and I blacked out. When I woke up, I was back in my hospital room. My parents were there, and another doctor informed me that the previous one had mysteriously resigned. The police investigated and found the satanic symbols in the hidden room, but unfortunately, there was no legal action against trying to force someone to sell their soul. I was discharged, and I vowed never to return to a hospital again. The last time I was there was when they removed my cast. I only survived because I blacked out before the ritual was complete. That doctor left me in the room, hoping I wouldn't remember anything. Many people say that it doesn't exist, while others claim to have had experiences where they were victims, affected by its evil and power. On the other hand, I can say that its greatest tool for spreading hate and causing harm is mankind. A terrible experience confirmed that I wasn't wrong. It was in 2014. I was in the hospital after the bus I was on had an accident when it was hit by another vehicle on the side where I was sitting. My right arm was broken and had to be cast, and I was constantly feeling dizzy, so much so that they had to give me medication, not just for the pain, but also to help me sleep. My family was extremely worried, and few could visit me because their work schedules conflicted with the visiting hours. Some days my aunt came, other days a cousin, and sometimes I was alone informing them of everything through my phone. It was exhausting having to do everything with just one hand, and the cast would stay on me for a long time, even after I was discharged. The worst part was the doctor. He was always scolding me for something. Sometimes for my sitting posture, other times for how I was keeping the IV in my hand. He'd pull it out without warning, but there was no choice but to endure it. At times he would scare me, saying that further tests were needed, and that the ones they had done didn't look good, and that I should prepare for the worst. I didn't know what kind of doctor would give a patient such a diagnosis like that, but I had to bear it. I didn't want to tell my mother, not even over the phone. I knew her too well. She'd probably leave work just to confront the doctor and put him in his place. I would have loved to see that, but I didn't want to cause any trouble at the hospital or at my mum's job, so I distracted myself with my phone and books, reading at an incredible speed since I had nothing else to do. Finally, that night came, the one that changed everything. The bitter, disrespectful doctor entered my room with a serious look. I thought he was about to scold me again, or tell me how much I annoyed him. Seriously, he was unbearable. but instead he told me that he had the results of all the tests, and although I didn't show any symptoms, the impact on my head had caused severe damage, which could lead to a stroke at any moment, and there was nothing they could do about it. I burst into tears in front of him, and he tried to comfort me, saying that it was still possible I wouldn't experience it in the days to come, but it could happen in months or even years. He added that surgery was impossible because the risk would be too high. He left, but 2 hours later he came back to find me crying uncontrollably. I hadn't even told my mom yet. The doctor came in again, and this time he told me that my father had just suffered a terrible accident and the paramedics didn't think he could survive. My pain tripled, and I began to cry and scream without caring about anything else. The doctor hugged me, consoled me, and then whispered in my ear, asking if I was willing to do whatever it took to save my father. I said yes, and he explained that there was a way to save not only my father, but also myself. I wiped my tears and asked how. He replied that if I sold my soul through him, he would ensure our lives would be extended, with health and prosperity. I was shocked, but he immediately made it clear that I couldn't tell anyone and had to respond right then. I didn't know what to do. I was overwhelmed with grief and not thinking clearly, so I nodded, agreeing. He took the IV out, helped me out of bed, and told me to follow him to a room he had prepared for this purpose. None of the nurses said anything. They looked at us as though walking with him was normal, something that happened all the time. As he had said, he led me to a room that was lit by candles with red walls. In the center of the room was a white pentagram, and he asked me to kneel in the center. I did as he said. He handed me some sheets of paper with prayers in a language I didn't understand, but it specified exactly how to pronounce them. The doctor was clear. For everything to go well, I had to say every word and then spit while keeping the request in my mind. He would take care of the rest. I started reading slowly, and within seconds I saw the flames of the candles grow, reaching over 1 meter high. The heat intensified to the point where the air conditioning no longer mattered, and my body began to feel cold while sweating. I shivered, my breath becoming white smoke, and soon I began hearing voices telling me to read faster. They were eager to claim my soul and asked if I really wanted my father to stay alive, that I should hurry up and finish reading. I was crying as I read, knowing it was a terrible idea. I had only 4 more paragraphs to go, but by then I could see people in the room, their eyes red and their smiles grotesque and diabolical. I was terrified, but the doctor told me to ignore them. They were just witnesses. The pentagram changed from white to red, and the candles burned down as I neared the end. The headache grew unbearable, and I fainted. When I woke up, I was in my hospital room again. My parents were there, and another doctor was with me. They told me that the previous doctor had quit and left without saying anything. I told them everything, and they called the police. They found the room with all the satanic symbols, but they said that forcing someone to sell their soul wasn't considered a crime under the law, so the complaint was invalid. I was discharged and vowed never to return to a hospital. The last time was when they took the cast off. I was saved from selling my soul, only because for some strange reason I fainted, and the doctor decided to leave me in the room, hoping I wouldn't remember anything. And those were today's stories. Did you like any of them? Comment on which one you liked and tell us if you've ever experienced something like this in your life. Don't forget to like, and I hope to see you in the next video, if you have the courage to watch more stories.